Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with a swatch party video. This is a series that has been very anticipated on my channel. I have been working on getting this done for a while now, but I wanted to optimize the way I swatch things and use like my lighting and stuff to make sure the shifts show up properly. And I feel like I'm in a place now where I have kind of sorted that out. So we're going to start with one of my smallest collections, which is Glam shop, and I have a couple of shadows, as you can see here, that I'm going to swatch out today, and yeah, I'm excited to share that with you. But before I jump into any of the swatching, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. Let's jump into the video. So we have the first shadow right here, and before I start going through the names and everything, I'm really sorry if I butcher the names because they are in Polish, but this is the shadow Pił Księżycowy, as you can see on the screen right here. Again, I'm really sorry about butchering, but that is the first shadow. I would say that this eyeshadow has a very smooth, almost wet feeling texture with lots of sparkles. The particle size is small, which gives it almost a scattered, sparkly effect. And with this shift, I think it goes from like a strong icy blue to a pink with a hint of purple in between. Next up, we have Turbo Mgielka. And this is a very similar shadow to the last one, but the texture is a bit chunkier with a medium particle size. The formula is pretty standard, I would say, for indie shimmers, but a little bit drier than other ones that I have tried. And the shift is slightly more teal than the last one, and it goes into more of a violet shift rather than pink. The next shadow is Poswiata, and this is a very similar texture to the last one. I would say almost this one is a little bit drier even and chunkier, but otherwise they are quite similar. The shift goes from a vibrant violet to a pink to a gold. Moving away from the iridescent shadows, we have Turbo Wata Cukrowa. This is another shadow that feels a little bit drier. And honestly, from the shadows that I have from them, this is the most common formula. This one is a bit sheer, but it's definitely buildable, and it has a smaller particle size. The base of this one is a sheer orange kind of color, and it has a vibrant pink, almost violet shift that goes into an orangey yellow gold. Bombowy is next, and this shadow has a smoother feel than the last couple shadows that I've shown you. The particle size is again on the smaller side, but it gives a nice twinkle, kind of sparkle all over. The shadow reminds me a lot of shadows like Cleona Blaze and Divina Tucana, and I would consider this as spicy neutral, as Riley would say, and it has a warm pink shift that goes into a bronzy orange to a yellow gold. The base color is the same kind of bronze, but it can easily be sheared out. Next up we have Druid, and Druid is another drier shadow that has a smaller particle size, which provides a nice sparkle without being chunky. This is kind of the first shadow without any distinct shifts. It's more of a traditional kind of sparkly metallic, or arguably a subtle duochrome. The shadow has a moss green base with tons of greeny gold sparkle, and it can easily be built up to show more of the green base, or sheared out for more of a gold effect. Next up, we have Steryd. Steryd is another kind of wet feeling shadow like the first one I mentioned, which makes it really smooth and glossy looking. It has a medium particle size that can easily be worn more sheer or built up. With its brown base, this shadow is again a fun take on a neutral, and it has a greeny gold shift that goes into kind of like a taupey, cool taupey purple, and then disappears over the brown base. Next up, we have one of the most famous ones, I would say, which is Zyg-Zak. This has a similar format to the last one, where it's not as chunky as dry as some of the previous shadows, but it's still very buildable, and the particle size is smaller, which in this case actually gives it more of a smooth effect. This shadow is such a fun one. It has a really strong shift from a bright green to a pinky red. And again, the shadow has a brown base, but it's a bit deeper this time, which means that the shift is almost electric. I believe this is a color dupe to Divina Hysteria, but I don't own that one, so I haven't swatched them out. The next shadow is Szlagier, and again, this is a bit of a drier formula, but it's not as chunky as some of the earlier ones due to the smaller particle size. This one isn't one of the most shifty shadows that I have from Glam Shop, but I love it because it's such an interesting and wearable silver. It's overall quite a traditional, almost slightly blue-leaning silver, but in the main shift there's almost a hint of a green, which gives this shadow some warmth. Don't get me wrong, this is a very much a cool tone shadow still, but it just makes it really unique and wearable in my opinion. Next up we have another famous shadow, this is Laser. We have again a slightly drier formula, but it looks quite chunky actually at first, but once you pick it up it's very smooth and it picks up quite sheerly. This one does yet again have a very distinct shift. I would say it's almost like the younger sibling to Zyg-Zak, where it does have a green shift that goes into pink. This shadow does not have much of a base though, and if any, it almost like a lilac or cool purple base. But this means that the colors in this eyeshadow aren't as saturated, but it's still one of my favorite eyeshadows, and the shift is very, very distinct, but it's somewhat still wearable, which is why I like it so much. Next, we have Vegas Biz. This formula is again on the drier side, but it's a little bit crumblier than the previous ones that I mentioned. I would say it has a medium particle size that looks a little bit more textured even when smoothed out. This is a more dimensional take on the typical blue-brown shadow, and it has a warm brown base that shifts into a cool toned blue, as well as a pink on the edges. In certain lights, the blue shift almost has a teal hue to it, but I would still classify it as blue. Next up, we have the famous Tiul, or Tiul. Even though the shadow has a smaller particle size, the dry formula still makes the shadow a little bit more crumbly. The shadow smooths out quite nicely and has a nice sparkle throughout it. This shadow was like the first of its kind, and it has since had quite a few variations come from this shadow in different brands. It's a vibrant teal base that goes into pink and a violet shift. I feel like at an angle you can almost see a yellowy green shift that contrasts nicely with the cooler green base. Next shadow is Zorza. This is another dry formula, but it's a little bit firmer pressed. This formula is quite sheer, but can be built up somewhat if you want more of an impact. The particle size is on the smaller side again, but it does have some nice sparkles running throughout it. The base of the shadow is a warm lilac and the main shift is a taupey green. At certain angles you can also see almost a cool purple, almost blue shift. And despite having some colorful and contrasting shifts, the colors aren't as saturated as in some other shadows, which makes this a nice neutral adjacent shade. So we're moving away from the kind of classic shimmer shadows and moving into some more kind of unique formulas. And this is kind of the holo ones. The first one, as you can see, is Bajer Holo. This formula can be quite tricky to work with. You have to be quite gentle with it as it picks up a lot whenever you go to use it. You can see it in the pan that pigments are almost separated, but they smooth out nicely to create a holo effect. This is kind of like the traditional silver holo shadow, and if anything, it does have almost like a bluish silver tint to it on the sides, with a slightly violet shift running through it. The holo effect is best seen in direct light, such as sunlight, and my favorite way to wear the shadow is actually sheared out as almost like a holographic topper. The second holographic shadow that I have is Złote Holo, and this is a very similar texture and formula to the last one, and again you have to be quite gentle with it. All of the holographic shadows have quite a small particle size that smooths out nicely, especially when using your finger to apply. Złote means gold in Polish, and this kind of sums up the shadow, and it is kind of the gold version of Bajer Holo. It has a warm bronzy base and a cooler gold shift running through it, with some holo sparkles coming through. Then last up for the holographic shadows, we have Holo Na Ciepło. And this formula is similar to the last two, but there are some differences. The base is a bit stronger in this shadow, and the holo sparkles almost chunk up in the middle, and that might sound like a bad thing, and yes, it does make the shadow a little bit more fiddly, but it also means that this works really well as a one single kind of shadow look, as the base can be blended out on the edges. This is like the rose gold sister to the last two, and it has a rosy, almost coppery base with a cooler tone shift, which I think is due to the nature of the holographic sparkles. And at the far end of the shadow, this shifts into a kind of caramelly bronzy brown. The next two shadows are my two pressed glitters. The first one is Wirus or Virus. This is, like I said, a pressed glitter, but the glitter particles are very fine. They smooth out surprisingly well, and especially over glitter glue, but even in the swatch here, which is on my bare skin, you can see what I mean. This is one of my favorites, if not my favorite pressed glitter. And since it's a pressed glitter, the particles mean that this one is quite shifty. It has a light golden green shift as the main shift, but then it goes into blue, teal, violet, purple shifts at different angles. And again, I do love this one. The second out of my two pressed glitters is Sztos. Formula-wise, this is again very similar to the last one. However, I do feel like this one adheres slightly better on the bare skin than the last one. Otherwise, the glitter particle size is similar and they smooth out in a similar way. This one is quite interesting because although it is a pressed glitter, it does have a base running through it. The base is a warm brown and the shift, it goes from a grassy green to a violet to a pink. And certain angles, it do also see a blue shift coming through. And this one is stunning, but not as versatile due to its base. The last of my shadows is my one and only matte, which is Kwasniak, which I think means acidic. The formula is very powdery, so you need to be gentle when you pick it up. It blends nicely, but can oxidize a bit, as you can see it does here in the swatch. But I do also think that it's slightly due to the nature of this color. And overall, this is a good matte, but it's not one of my most favorite formulas. This is a very yellow toned green, and you could almost call it an acid green if you would like, hence the name. It's a very interesting color, and it's beautiful, but it's quite sheer and comes off almost a bit more yellow than green on the skin. So here you see an overview of all of my shadows. These are all the traditional shimmers, and from the top of my hand down, we have, and again, forgive my pronunciations, Tiul, Turbo, Mgielka, Poswiata, Turbo Wata Cukrowa, Bombowy, Druid, Steryd, Zyg-Zak, Szlagier, Laser, Vegas Biz, Tiul, and lastly Zorza. Here we have the last shadows, and these are my holo shadows, my pressed glitters, and my mattes. And we have from, again, my top of my hand down, Bajer Holo, Złote Holo, Holo Na Ciepło, Wirus, Sztos, and lastly Kwasniak. So that, you guys, was all for this video today. I really hope you enjoyed it. This is a new format for me, and the first time I'm doing a voiceover, so I hope it worked out okay. I don't know if the audio is going to be the absolute best. I might invest in a microphone if it's too much of a bother, let me know. But otherwise, yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this video. It has been quite requested to do series videos like this of my collection, my singles collection. And yes, there will be coming other brands. I have already filmed 2 more brands. I just need to edit them and get them up. But I will do this with every single one of my indie brands. And you started with one of my smallest ones. But yeah, that is it for today. And I really, really hope you have a lovely day wherever you are. And I will catch you in my next one. Bye, guys.